For thousands of years, humanity has whispered the names of the goddesses as if they were distant, untouchable stars, frozen in marble and myth. We remember them for their vanity, their wrath, and their unyielding power. But history is often written by the victors, and the definitions of beauty have shifted beneath the feet of the immortals. What if the most ancient hierarchy of power was dismantled and reconstructed under the harsh glare of modern scrutiny, where a crown is not given by birthright, but earned through purpose? We are about to witness an event that defies the laws of antiquity, a collision of the divine and the democratic, where the queens of Olympus are forced to descend from their thrones and compete not for a golden apple that starts a war, but for a title that demands humanity. This is not a test of who has the fairest skin or the brightest eyes. It is a brutal examination of the soul, and among the glittering deities stands a figure who was never meant to be here, a woman whose very gaze was once a death sentence. The atmosphere atop Mount Olympus has shifted from the serene silence of eternity to the chaotic electricity of a television studio, as the marble columns are now draped in the blue banners of the Miss World organization. The air smells of ozone ambrosia and the sharp chemical tang of hairspray as the contestants take their places. First, there is Hera, wearing the sash of Miss Olympus, radiating a terrifying regal energy, clad in a gown of woven peacock feathers that shimmer with iridescent greens and blues. She does not walk, she glides, with the expectation of victory, her chin tilted upward in a perpetual sneer of authority, representing the old guard where power was absolute and marriage was a political weapon. To her left stands Aphrodite, Miss Cyprus, the undisputed favorite, whose skin seems to generate its own soft focus lighting. She is the physical embodiment of desire, wearing a dress that flows like liquid ocean water. Yet there is a vacancy in her eyes, a confidence that relies entirely on the surface. Then comes Athena, Miss Athens, in high-fashion armor, a structured silver corset that gleams under the stage lights, holding a spear, not as a weapon, but as a terrifying accessory, her eyes scanning the judges like a predatory bird analyzing data. Artemis, Miss Wilderness, looks visibly uncomfortable in formal wear, her athletic frame tense, her makeup minimal, representing the raw, unpolished force of nature. And then, at the far end of the line, stands the anomaly, Medusa, Miss Gorgon. The audience falls into a hushed, uneasy silence as she steps forward, wearing pitch-black sunglasses to shield the world from her lethal gaze. Her hair is not a coiffed updo, but a nest of living, breathing vipers that coil and hiss with a hypnotic rhythm. She is the underdog, the monster, the survivor, standing amidst the gods who cursed her. The competition begins not with a display of grace, but with a test of endurance, as the fast-track sports challenge kicks off, shattering the composure of the divine. The track is laid out across the clouds, a grueling relay designed to break the spirit of those who have never known physical labor. The starting pistol fires, and immediately the hierarchy begins to fracture. Artemis explodes from the starting block, a blur of muscle and instinct, her movements efficient and predatory, leaving the others choking on dust. She is the goddess of the hunt, and this arena is her natural habitat. She does not run for applause. She runs because it is what she was built to do, tearing through the obstacles with a ferocity that leaves the judges stunned. In stark contrast, Aphrodite falters at the first hurdle, checking her reflection in a polished shield and slowing down to ensure her sweat does not ruin the symmetry of her face. Eventually stepping off the track entirely with a dismissive wave, refusing to degrade herself with exertion. Hera does not run. She marches, barking orders at the officials, demanding the finish line be brought to her, unaware that in this new world her commands hold no weight. Artemis crosses the finish line miles ahead, securing her place in the top tier, proving that beauty requires strength and discipline, while the queens of Olympus are left gasping for air, their divinity stripped away by the raw reality of physical effort. As night falls, the mood shifts from the grit of the track to the blinding glamour of the top model challenge, a round designed to favor the vanity of the gods. The runway is a beam of moonlight stretching out over the Aegean Sea, and Aphrodite steps onto it as if reclaiming her birthright. This is her domain. Every step she takes is a masterclass in seduction, her hips swaying with a mathematical perfection that has launched 1,000 ships. The fabric of her ocean-themed gown ripples as if alive, and for a moment it seems impossible that anyone could challenge the literal concept of beauty. The judges are captivated, blinded by the halo of perfection she projects. But then the music shifts to a lower, darker bass line, and Medusa emerges. She does not possess the soft, inviting warmth of Aphrodite. Instead, she brings an edge, a dangerous avant-garde aesthetic that feels startlingly modern. She wears the trauma of her past like a suit of armor, her sunglasses reflecting the camera flashes, while the snakes in her hair move in synchronized rhythm with her stride, creating a visual spectacle that is both terrifying and mesmerizing. It is a beauty that bites back a dark allure that challenges the viewer to look away, but they cannot. While Aphrodite offered perfection, Medusa offers a story, a visual narrative of resilience that suddenly makes the goddess of love look one-dimensional and dated. The spotlight narrows to a single, blinding white circle as the runway is cleared away, replacing the superficial allure of silk and sequins with the cold, unforgiving geometry of a debate podium. This is the head-to-head challenge, the moment where the silence of the statue is broken and the intellect of the divine is laid bare before a global audience. The air in the auditorium grows heavy with expectation because for millennia these goddesses have been symbols and metaphors, but they have rarely been asked to explain themselves. Hera steps up to the microphone first, her posture rigid with an entitlement that feels increasingly brittle in the modern glare. The question posed to her is simple, concerning the defining quality of the modern woman, and her answer is a crash collision between the Bronze Age and the 21st century. She speaks of duty, of submission to the husband, of the sanctity of the bloodline, delivering a monologue that sounds less like wisdom and more like a decree from a tyrant. Her voice booms with the echo of ancient temples, but the words land with a hollow thud. The audience shifts uncomfortably in their seats, the silence stretching thin, as they realize the Queen of the Gods is advocating for a world that humanity has fought centuries to dismantle. She mistakes their stunned silence for reverence, unaware that she has just alienated the very world she seeks to rule. Then Athena takes the stage, and the temperature in the room seems to drop 10 degrees, sharpening into a crystal-clear focus. She does not wear a crown. She wears the confidence of a grand master who has already played out the game in her head 10 moves ahead. When she speaks, her voice is not a thunderclap, but a surgical instrument dissecting the complex issues of education, geopolitical stability, and gender equality, with a fluency that leaves the judges breathless. She weaves ancient philosophy with modern policy, switching from Greek to English to French without missing a beat. This is not just a goddess. This is a diplomat, a strategist who understands that power today is not wielded with a lightning bolt, but with information. While Hera spoke of ruling, Athena speaks of serving, and the contrast is devastating. The scoreboard lights up green as Athena secures a landslide victory in the debate, leaving the Queen of Olympus fuming in the shadows, her worldview shattering under the weight of logic. But the true crucible arrives with the segment known as Beauty with a Purpose, the soul of the Miss World competition, where the contestants must prove their divinity is not just decorative. The screen descends and the auditorium goes dark for the project presentations. Hera's initiative, titled Save Marriage, is projected first, and it is a disaster of public relations. A montage of aggressive enforcement of fidelity that feels vindictive rather than supportive, exposing her obsession with control rather than compassion. Athena follows with a project that is clinically perfect, presenting a comprehensive plan for sustainable agriculture and literacy using the olive tree as a symbol of peace. It is impressive, practical, and undeniably beneficial, earning nods of approval from the judges who respect the efficiency of the solution. It is the safe choice, the smart choice, the choice of the head. And then Medusa steps forward. The room is still buzzing with the intellectual high of Athena's presentation, but as the Gorgon approaches the microphone, the atmosphere shifts into something heavy and intimate. Her project is simply titled, Speak Up. She does not have charts or graphs. She has a story. For the first time, she takes off her sunglasses, revealing eyes that are not deadly, but deeply sorrowful, and she begins to speak about the temple where she was assaulted, about the victim-blaming that followed, and the curse that was placed upon her by a society that preferred to demonize the survivor rather than punish the perpetrator. The snakes in her hair, usually restless and hissing, fall silent, as if listening to the confession of their host. She reframes her monstrous appearance not as a punishment, but as a shield for the voiceless, a symbol for every woman who has been demonized for her own trauma. The silence in the auditorium is no longer awkward. It is profound, a collective holding of breath as the audience realizes they are witnessing a paradigm shift. Athena offered them a solution to a problem, but Medusa offered them a mirror to their own pain. The silence that descends upon the studio is thick enough to choke on as the master of ceremonies breaks the seal of the envelope, the paper tearing with a sound that echoes like a gunshot across the amphitheater. The old world is holding its breath, expecting the familiar names that have dominated history. But the new world has voted, and the results are a violent dismantling of the status quo. The first name called is Artemis Miss Wilderness, confirming that strength and discipline have a place on the podium. The second name is Athena Miss Athens, proving that intellect is the backbone of modern power. And then comes the pause, the agonizing heartbeat where centuries of tradition hang in the balance. Before the microphone, amplifies the final name, Medusa. The gasp from the audience is audible, a mixture of shock and awe. While backstage, the impossible happens. Hera, the queen of Olympus, and Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty, have been eliminated. The cameras catch the fracture in Hera's porcelain mask, the genuine disbelief that her title and bloodline were not enough to save her. While Aphrodite stands frozen, her perfect reflection suddenly meaningless without the validation of the crown. The stage is now cleared, leaving only three distinct archetypes of womanhood: the warrior, the scholar, and the survivor, standing beneath the blinding white lights for the final interrogation. The final question is delivered with the weight of a judicial sentence, asking simply why each of them deserves to carry the title of Miss World. Artemis answers first, speaking with a breathless passion about the preservation of the wild, about the health of the planet, and the sanctity of the hunt. It is a noble answer, grounded in the physical reality of the earth, but it feels distinct from humanity, almost aloof in its focus on the wild over the civilized. Then Athena steps forward and delivers a thesis on global diplomacy, weaving a tapestry of logic that promises a world without war, governed by reason and strategy. It is technically flawless, a perfect answer from a perfect mind. But as the applause fades, there is a lingering coldness, a sense that she is solving humanity like a math equation, rather than feeling it. Then the microphone is lowered for Medusa. She stands alone, the snakes coiling softly around her neck, no longer looking like monsters, but like guardians. She speaks not of grand policy or nature, but of the dark corners of the human experience. She says that she does not deserve the crown because she is perfect, but because she knows what it means to be broken. She tells the world that beauty is not the absence of scars, but the ability to heal them, and that she represents the hope that even those cast aside by the gods can rise again. The deliberation is agonizingly slow, the judges conversing in hushed tones, while the massive screens behind the stage cycle through the faces of the finalists. The tension is no longer about a beauty pageant. It is about a choice between three philosophies of existence: the wild freedom of nature, the ordered logic of the mind, or the empathetic resilience of the soul. The announcer returns to the center stage, and the music swells to a crescendo, a thunderous orchestral wave that shakes the floorboards. He announces the second runner-up is Artemis. The first runner-up is Athena. And for a split second, the world stops spinning as the implications settle in. The winner of Miss World is Medusa. Pandemonium erupts, not the polite applause of a gala, but the roar of a revolution. Confetti rains down in silver and blue as the former outcast steps forward, her hands trembling not from fear, but from redemption. The blue crown is brought out sparkling with sapphires and diamonds, and as it is placed upon her head, a strange and beautiful thing happens. The snakes that crown her brow do not strike. Instead, they rise up, hissing softly, weaving through the jewels, as if they are part of the regalia itself. Medusa weeps, tears slipping out from under her dark glasses. And for the first time in history, a monster is celebrated as the most beautiful woman in the world, not for her face, but for her purpose. The broadcast signal fades to black, and the millions of viewers back on Earth return to their daily lives, satisfied with the fairy tale ending of the monster turned queen. But here on Olympus, the story does not end when the cameras stop rolling. In fact, the real drama is only just beginning. As the stage lights are dismantled and the confetti is swept away by the winds of the upper atmosphere, the atmosphere shifts from celebration to a cold, terrifying hostility. We are now entering the Coronation Ball, the exclusive post-pageant ceremony held in the great hall of Zeus, where the polite veneer of the competition is stripped away and the ancient, brutal politics of the gods resume. Medusa enters the room, still wearing the blue sash and the sapphire crown, but the silence that greets her is not one of awe. It is heavy with resentment. The air smells of ambrosia and ozone, but underneath there is the metallic tang of suppressed violence. To the old guard, her victory is not an inspiration. It is an insult. Hera sits on her golden throne, swirling a goblet of nectar, her eyes narrowing as she watches the woman she considers a beast wearing the symbol of ultimate grace. Aphrodite is nowhere to be seen, having retreated to her chambers in humiliation, refusing to be in the presence of a world that chose a Gorgon over the goddess of love. Medusa stands alone near the center of the hall, clutching a glass of wine, her knuckles white. She realizes now that winning the crown was the easy part. Surviving the reign will be the true test. The minor deities and nymphs whisper behind their hands, their gazes flickering between the new queen and the dark corner of the room where the true threat is gathering. Poseidon, the earth-shaker and the god of the seas, is watching her. History tells us that he is the architect of her trauma, the one who violated the sanctity of Athena's temple and set her cursed fate in motion. He steps out of the shadows, and the room goes deathly quiet. The floorboards vibrate with a low-frequency hum, a warning of the earthquake contained within his frame. He does not see a Miss World winner. He sees a loose end. He approaches her with a predator's grace, the water in the surrounding fountains rippling in sympathy with his anger. He leans in close enough that she can smell the salt and the deep ocean pressure on his skin, and whispers a reminder that crowns made by mortals do not protect against the wrath of immortals. It is a chilling moment, a collision between the new world's empathy and the old world's impunity. Medusa does not back down, the snakes in her hair rising up to meet his gaze, hissing a warning. But she is visibly trembling. The tension is at a breaking point, a single spark away from a divine war that could shatter the mountain. But before the first blow can be struck, the massive bronze doors of the great hall are blasted open, not by wind, but by a sheer concussive force of silence. The temperature in the room plummets instantly, freezing the condensation on the wine glasses and turning the breath of the gods into white mist. The whispering stops. Even Poseidon takes a step back, his arrogance faltering. Entering the hall is a figure who was not invited to the pageant, who was not asked to judge, and who has not set foot on Olympus for centuries. Hades, the Lord of the Dead. He wears a suit cut from the darkness of the underworld, tailored with the precision of a funeral director. He does not look at Zeus. He does not look at Poseidon. His eyes, which burn with the cold blue light of glowing embers, are fixed squarely on Medusa. He walks across the frozen floor, the sound of his footsteps echoing like the ticking of a doomsday clock. The narrative has shifted again. The competition for the surface world is over, but the king of the underworld has arrived to remind them that all beauty eventually fades, and all queens eventually come to him. He stops in front of Medusa, reaches out a pale hand, and offers her something that makes the entire assembly gasp. It is not a weapon. It is an invitation. The silence in the great hall of Zeus is absolute, a vacuum where sound refuses to travel, as Hades holds out his hand, revealing the object that sits in his pale palm. It is not a golden apple, nor a diamond ring, but a single pomegranate seed, carved from obsidian, blacker than the void between stars. The symbolism is terrifyingly clear to every immortal in the room, because this is not a gift, it is a contract. Hades speaks, his voice sounding like the grinding of tectonic plates deep beneath the earth, telling Medusa that she has won a crown made of metal in a kingdom built on vanity. But he is offering her a throne made of shadow in a kingdom built on truth. He tells her that Olympus will never truly accept her, that she will always be a trophy to be displayed, or a monster to be hidden, depending on their mood. But in the underworld, her gaze does not need to be hidden behind sunglasses. In his realm, monsters are not feared, they are employed. The temperature in the room drops another 10 degrees as the implication settles in. The Lord of the Dead is poaching the newly crowned Miss World right in front of the King of the Gods, and there is nothing Zeus or Poseidon can do about it, because even the sky and the sea must eventually bow to the inevitable gravity of the grave. Medusa stands frozen at the crossroads of her existence, the sapphire crown heavy on her head and the sash of Miss Gorgon draped across her chest. She looks at the glittering assembly of gods, at the fearful eyes of Aphrodite and the arrogant sneer of Hera, and she realizes the hollow nature of her victory. She fought so hard to be beautiful in their eyes, to twist her trauma into a shape they would applaud. But she sees now that their applause is fickle. She looks at Poseidon, the source of her pain, standing impotent in the shadows, fear flickering in his eyes for the first time, and she realizes that the crown did not give her power. Her monsterhood gave her power. Her darkness is what made her strong. Slowly, with a grace that is no longer rehearsed for a panel of judges, she reaches out and takes the obsidian seed from Hades' hand. The snakes in her hair hiss in a collective chorus of approval, their scales shifting from green to a deep royal purple. She reaches up and unpins the blue sash that says Miss Gorgon, letting the silk fabric slip from her shoulder and pool on the marble floor like a shed skin. She is done competing for their approval. She turns her back on the cameras on the throne of Zeus and on the weeping Aphrodite, and takes Hades' arm. As they walk toward the bronze doors, the shadows of the room seem to stretch out to meet them, swallowing the light of the chandeliers. The broadcast feed cuts to static, but the image is burned into the minds of the universe. The silhouette of the beauty queen and the death god, walking out of heaven to rule in hell. The doors slam shut with a finality that shakes the foundations of Mount Olympus, leaving the gods alone in their golden cage. The pageant is over, and the winner has left the building, taking the very definition of beauty with her into the dark. The irony of this entire spectacle is blinding. We spent weeks obsessing over who was the most beautiful goddess, only to discover that the most powerful woman in the room was the one we called a monster. Medusa proved that true sovereignty isn't about winning a contest. It is about realizing you don't need to compete at all. In our modern lives, we are constantly dancing for the judges of society, desperately trying to win the sash of approval from our bosses, our peers, and our social media followers, terrified of being ostracized. But Medusa teaches us a dangerous lesson, that sometimes the only way to truly win is to drop the sash, walk away from the light, and embrace the power of your own darkness. So here is the final question that defines your character. If you had the choice, would you rather be a beloved servant in the bright halls of Olympus, or a feared ruler in the shadows of the underworld? Do you crave validation, or do you crave freedom? Let me know your choice in the comments below, because the line between a monster and a queen is thinner than you think. If you want to see what happens when we put the gods of Egypt to the test, hit that subscribe button, because the next pageant is going to be ancient.
I did not come to win your game. I came to end it.